Today I'm going to talk about the smartphone computing research because we know the smartphone was very popular these days. Okay. So this I give you the outline for today's talk. So first I want to introduce you what is this research. Also, when you are doing the research, you need to study the trend. Okay, you don't want to do the research that is out of date. So I will show you some data about the smartphone computing. Then let's talk about what is the smartphone. Then what is the smartphone computing. Then later on, because there are so many research areas you can do about the smartphone. So I show you a couple of the research areas about smartphone research. Then I give you the conclusions. So first, many people come to me and ask me, okay, I have a very good idea, and I want to design an app. But most of their idea fail. It's because the smartphone research is not just about the computer science or mobile computing. It related a couple of the disciplines. So for example, first you have the ideas. Okay, you need to design the app and develop the app. But also, when you have the app, you also need to consider about the user interface. Make the user very easy to use in your interface. Of course, we need the mobile communication. That is, we have the 4G, 5G, and even people talk about the 6G these days. Then next, when you design the app, you want to see what kind of the requirement you want. You talk to the owners, companies, and they give you the spec, their requirement. Then finally, you have the owner's spec, but you also need to think about from the other side, the user. When the user using your app, you need to make the app is very easy to use, so more people will come and using your app. Okay, so the smartphone computing actually is a multidisciplinary subject. Next, as I mentioned, when you do the research, you need to study the trend. If you look at the internet, okay, the top 10 best IT job for currently and in the future, the number one is the mobile application developer. Okay, this is about the IT, but if you look at the overall careers, the mobile application developer is still ranked very high. And we know the IT is very popular job these days. So this, if you are going for the smartphone computing research, then this probably is a good idea. Next, the core part for the smartphone is the operating system. We know the desktop operating system are dominated by the Windows and also the Apple. Same thing happened to the mobile operating system. If you look back 10 years ago, probably there are 10 mobile operating systems available. But today's only 2 left, just like for the desktop computer, we also have the Linux. But same thing for the mobile operating system. Some companies, they are trying to develop the operating system based on the Linux. But at this moment, they have only a very small part of the market shares. So if you look at the 2 brands, Android and iOS, Android dominates the market because it's the open source. So most of the smartphones using the Androids. Of course, the rest are dominated by the iOS, Apples. So if you look at here, the Android is almost 90% of the market. iOS probably is decreasing a little bit every year. Probably eventually they will come to 10% or something. Okay, the others, they cannot. So for example, Windows trying to beat the Android probably 5 years ago, but they failed. So these days, probably the Microsoft is out of the mobile operating system market so far. Then next, you look at the smartphone market shares. Okay, other than the Samsung and the Apple, other major smartphone manufacturers are from China. So we expect the China's smartphone manufacturer will dominate the market. The Samsung's market, I believe, will be slowed down. Okay, if you look at the last quarter, the Samsung takes the 23%. It's because the Samsung launched a new device. But after the launchings, the market share probably will be down. And the Chinese smartphone market will be up little by little. And the Apple are always stays about the same. Then next, you want to see what kind of the app are popular. You look at the popular app, then you think about your own idea, whether it works or not, and then look at the others' experience. So if you look at the most used mobile app, many they are for the messages. Okay, so for example, WhatsApp, Facebook, other apps. Okay. Next, if we're using the smartphone, many times we are using a smartphone to communicate with our friends and the colleagues. So same thing. It's very similar to the previous one. WhatsApp, Facebook, QQ, mobile, WeChat, they are trying to communicate with your friend. Then next, we're using the smartphone, we want to play some video game or watch the movies, YouTube, Netflix, HBO, Spotify, and so on. Then we look at the data for the smartphone computing research. Then let's define what is the smartphone. When you create the application for the desktop computer, what are the differences between the smartphone and the desktop computings? Okay, I think there are three major differences. One is the mobilities. Right now I'm using the computer here. I stay here. But if I have a smartphone, I walk around. So you need to consider about the mobilities. Low communication bandwidth, okay? Because you are using smartphones, you are using mobile communication, so you need to think about the communication bandwidth is low compared to the desktop computers. Also, smartphone actually is a small computer, but it's not as powerful as the desktop computer. So its computing power and the resource are not as powerful as a desktop computer. Also, when you design your app, you need to think about the smartphone as a small screen. So you need to make your user interface as simple as possible. Next, if you open the smartphone case, you look, there are a couple of the components inside your smartphone. They are very similar to the desktop computers. First, a mobile operating system. We don't use the desktop operating system. We use a mobile operating system. That's Android or iOS. Mobile CPU. The desktop CPU, usually they are using the Intel machine. But if you look at the smartphone, I would say more than 90% they are using the ARM architectures. Intel trying to beat the ARM, but just like the Microsoft, they fail. Okay, so the mobile CPU right now is dominated by the ARM architecture. ARM does not manufacture the CPU, but they have the blueprint that they let the other CPU manufacturer created their own CPU based on their blueprint. So they have the different approach from the Intels. Mobile browsers, okay, we're using for example, UC browser to access the internet by using the smartphones. I/O device and the method. When I'm using the desktop, my input device usually is a keyboard. Output device is a screen or a printer. But when you are using the smartphone, you need to think of some other ways to do the input and the output. Memory and the storage. Also, the smartphone has a limited memory and the storage. So when you create your app, you need to think about the size of your memory and the storage. Batteries, okay. Battery is very important for your smartphone. You cannot create the app that take a lot of the powers. Otherwise, your smartphone will be out of the battery in a short time. Next, the major part of the smartphone is the mobile operating system. As I mentioned, there are two mobile operating systems dominated by the Android and the iOS. So this, I give a couple of the layers. Application program, you have many apps in your smartphone. Then you need the user interface to communicate with the app and the users. Next, you have the API. So you provide a lot of the function, allow the app to access your utilities. At the bottom, we have a couple of the components, but I think there are three components you need to be careful. One is the communication control. Okay, the smartphone, we are on the move all the time. So you need to consider about the bandwidth. Next one, real-time kernels. Why we want the real-time kernel? It's because when you are using a smartphone, you make phone calls. For the desktop computer, you can delay for 1 second or 2 seconds. That's not a problem. But for the smartphone, when you talk to your friend, you cannot be delayed by 1 or 2 seconds. So you require a quick response. That's the real-time kernels. The third one is the power management. For the desktop computer, you don't need to worry about the power because I plug in the computer to the electrical outlet. But for the smartphone, you are using the batteries. So you need to consider the power probably will be running out in a short times. Next, what is the smartphone computing? Okay, so I created the app. Of course, I need to develop the user interface front end. That's the client-side smartphone computing. Okay, that's the easy part. But if you want to make your app very useful, you need to connect to the server. So for example, I'm using my smartphone to do some banking transactions. If this banking transaction cannot go to my bank account, then it's useless. Okay, so you can only check the bank information, the times, the hours, the location, but it's not very useful. So I want to go to my bank account and check my account balance and so on. So this requires a server-side smartphone computing. So when you develop an app, there are a couple of the steps you need to do. Okay, so for example, you created your app. Then next, of course, you need to test your app. You don't want to use the smartphone to test your app because it is too small. And it's not easy to enter your data or type your program. So you need a smartphone emulator. Okay. For example, the Android Studio provides a very good emulator for you to test your app. Okay. Then next, you check whether the app meets your requirement. If it is, then of course, you need to synchronize your app to the real smartphone. But if it is not, then you go back again and redesign your app and using the emulator to test your result. Next, that's the client side. But for the server side, most of the app, they require the database support, as I mentioned, for the banking transaction. If there's no database, then the data could be limited. You want to go to the database and retrieve all kinds of data from the database. So like your bank account, your balance, and so on. So if you are using a database, then you need to do the database design and the database implementation. Also, you need to implement your program. For example, you are using an Android. You use an Android Studio to write the Java program and put it on the server side. At the same time, on the other hand, the user will using the smartphone to access your app. Most likely, they will go through the internet and connect to your server side. So there are many kinds of the topics allow you to do the smartphone computing. So for example, energy savings. We know the battery is very important for the smartphone. So you need to try to save as much energy as you could. Another one, for example, location-based service. I'm driving, I'm walking, I need the GPS. So that's the location-based service. Of course, we need the mobile communication, mobile network, mobile commerce system. I want to access my bank account. That's the mobile commerce, mobile data management, and so on. So, because there are so many research areas for the smartphone computing, so I'm not going to show you each one by one. So, but I want to show you some of them. Okay, first one, location-based service. Okay, so for example, I'm driving. I'm new in Orlando. I want to find the Chinese restaurants. Okay, so I using my smartphone and ask the query, where can I find the nearby Chinese restaurant? Also, is the best, good price, and so on. So you use a smartphone to enter your queries, and the tower will receive your request and go through the internet. Most likely, they will go through the internet. Then they go to the database. So for example, they go to some location-based service provider, and they go to the database, geographic database, and search the result, and they show the result back to you. So for this location-based service, first I need a smartphone. I need the mobile network. I need the satellite, because I need to tell the server where am I. Okay, so the location requires a satellite to pinpoint your location. Then next, I need to go to the server-side providers. They will store much of the geographic data inside the database and show the result to use. Also, I need the providers. Next, mobile commerce system structures. I want to use the smartphone to perform the mobile commerce. So as I mentioned, I go to the bank and I try to check my account balance, do the transfers. So first I have the app for my bank. Then next, I have the smartphone. Also, I need the mobile middleware. So what is the mobile middleware? We know the mobile network is very complicated. So when you develop the app, you don't want to go through the mobile network directly. You want to, using the mobile middleware, they can simplify the mobile network for use. So for example, most of the telecommunication company, like the AT&T, Verizon, they provide the mobile middleware for you, your smartphone to access their mobile network. Also, if you are indoors, so for example, you don't want to use a mobile network, you can use the Wi-Fi, so that's a wireless network. Then also, most likely you need to go to the server, then you have the host computer, then processing your request. Then another picture shows you the step for the mobile commerce transactions. I have the smartphone. I want to check my bank account. The wireless tower will receive my queries. I want to check my bank accounts. Then they will go through, because the mobile communication is very expensive. They don't want to, so for example, I want to check my account. My account is located in the Minneapolis. They don't want to send this query through the tower or wireless. Eventually, they will go to the landlines, okay? Then save the transmission fees, okay? Then they go to the internet, because as I mentioned, most of the mobile app, they're using the internet to connect to your servers. Then they will find my server located in Minneapolis. At my US bank, they have the server. They will go through my bank account and send the result back to me. So for example, I want to check my bank balance. Then they will follow through this step, go back to my smartphone. Then I can find what is my bank account balance. Next, mobile network. One of the major areas for the smartphone computing research is about the mobile network. We start from the 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, and the 5G at this time. And people talk about 6G right now, but right now we just enter the 5G. They were increasing the bandwidth. So you can watch the videos or you do the downloading very quickly instead of waiting for many minutes, okay? So the technology using by the 5G is a 4G plus WWWWs, okay? They use different technologies. And most of the mobile communication, they're using the track of the CDMAs, okay? And in the very beginning, we use the circuit, but right now we are using the packet switchings. And the core network is the internet, okay? So this is show you the 1 to 5G data. And if you want to do the research about the mobile network, you can start thinking about the 6G. Next, we're using the smartphone to do a lot of the mobile comms transaction. Also, when you are doing the mobile comms transaction, you need to consider about the securities, okay? So I use my smartphone to do the bank account transfer, okay? I want to transfer 10,000 from one account to another account, okay? Okay, probably this is about the payment, but it's same thing applied to the bank accounts, okay? I use my smartphone, okay, so probably I would say, okay, I want to buy a smartphone for the Amazon, from the Amazon.coms, and I need to pay, for example, $100, okay? So I go through the internet using my smartphone. Then when I do the purchasings, they need to verify whether I'm the smartphone user, okay? So Amazon.com, probably Amazon.com do this by themselves, but other companies, small or medium size, they cannot do the verification for use, okay? So usually we go through the third party, verify you are the one using the smartphone, okay? Like the total systems. They provided this kind of verification service for the many of the company or banks. Once they verify you are the owner of this smartphone or you are the account owner of this smartphone, then they will go to the bank, okay? Then, as I mentioned, I want to buy a smartphone for the $100, okay? Then this bank will pay, because I'm using a credit card, okay? So this bank will pay the $100 to the Amazon.coms, okay? So this is the amount. When it is more than $10, you're using this system. We call the macro payment scenarios. But many times, the amount is less than $10. So for example, I take the links, the bus here. It's only $2. So I don't want to use the $2 to go to my credit card, okay? So they have the micro payment scenario. That is, I go to the links bus, okay? I show the bus driver my smartphone and scan my smartphone on their scanners. Then the third party will check, okay, I'm the owner for this smartphone, so they will charge $2 to my account. But they won't go to the bank because each day you have the small amount of transaction. I buy a Coke, $1. I buy a bus ticket, $2, and so on. So they will charge this small amount of bill to your telephone bills. So at the end of each month, for example, my telecommunication company is Verizon. So Verizon, other than the telephone bills, they also charge my small transaction amount, $1 for the Coke, $2 for the bus ticket, and so on. So at the end, I will pay all this transaction to the Verizon, and the Verizon then relay my fee to the other company through the bank. Okay, so this one is a micro payment scenarios. Okay, then finally, I want to give you the summary for these talks. As I mentioned, when you are doing the research, you need to look at the trend. You don't want to do the research that is out of date. Okay, so you look at the trend. Future phone. So the future phone that is the basic phone. You cannot do much of the smartphone applications. So you can check your message, you can make phone call, but not much. So these days, the smartphone, you can look at the data here. The future phone, the number is decreasing, but the smartphone, the number of the smartphone is getting higher and higher. But these days, because almost everybody got a smartphone, so the rate is kind of go stable. So this is last year's data. Okay, they are coming to stables. For the PC, okay, is here. So they're kind of stable here at these times. So that's when you create the application, there are many platforms for you. Okay, I want to create the application for the desktop computer or for the smartphone. So the best choice for you is a smartphone when you create the app. Once you finish the app, then you can think about, okay, I created the application for the PC. Then tablet PC, okay. 10 years ago, many people say the tablet PC will replace the PC, but I don't think that's true. How could you do your office work by using a tablet PC? But we're using a tablet PC to play the video game and check the news. Okay, so same as the PC, they are kind of stable at this moment. Next, when you are doing the research about the smartphone, there are a couple of the resources you can find. So for example, we have the IEEE transaction of the mobile computing and so on. Okay, so these are the resources I using most of the times. Finally, I give you the structure for the smartphone, including the mobile operating system, mobile CPU, and so on. When you create the smartphone application, you need to think about the client and the server-side computing. Finally, a mobile comment is very important because we're using a smartphone to do the business transaction. They also include the 6 components when you develop the app. Okay, so this ends my talks. Okay. Thank you.